I was standing in the parking lot of a BMW dealership at 3 p.m. on a Tuesday, holding keys to a car I couldn't afford, and I felt like I was going to throw up. Not from excitement, from pure, raw terror. Because I had just signed my name on a loan for $38,000, and somewhere deep in my gut, beneath all the champagne they gave me and the congratulations from the sales guy, I knew I had just made the biggest financial mistake of my life. But here's the really messed up part. I was smiling. I was taking photos. I was already planning the Instagram post. Because that's what you do when you buy success, right? You celebrate. You show the world you made it. You prove you're not struggling anymore. Except I was struggling. I was drowning. And I had just strapped a $38,000 anchor to my chest. Let me paint you a picture of who I was at that moment. 30 years old. Financial advisor by day, which is hilarious in hindsight. Earned about $65,000 a year, which felt like good money until you actually tried to live on it in a major city. I had $17,000 in credit card debt that I was juggling like a circus act, moving balances around, making minimum payments, praying nothing would break. My savings account had $800 in it. $800. And I had just committed to a $647 monthly car payment for the next 6 years. The math didn't work. I knew the math didn't work. But I signed anyway. You know that feeling when you're doing something you know is wrong, but you can't stop yourself? When every logical part of your brain is screaming at you to walk away, but something else is pulling you forward. That was me in that dealership. The salesman had asked me what I did for a living, and when I said financial advisor, his eyes lit up. He started talking about how this car was an investment in my image, how clients would see me differently, how I needed to look successful to be successful. And I bought it. Not just the car. I bought the whole story. I bought the lie that what you drive determines what you're worth. Here's what nobody tells you about status purchases. They feel incredible for about 48 hours. Those first 2 days driving that BMW, I felt like I had finally arrived. I pulled up to my apartment complex and I swear I drove slower than usual so people would notice. I took the long way to work. I parked where everyone could see it. I checked on it through my office window like it was a newborn baby. And every time someone complimented it, every time someone said, wow, every time I saw that look of impressed surprise on their faces, it felt like validation, like proof that I had made the right decision, like evidence that I was finally successful. But on day 3, reality hit. My first payment was due in 30 days, $647, and then another $647 the month after that, and then again, and again, for 72 months. That's $7,764 a year just for the car payment, not counting insurance, not counting gas, not counting the premium parking spot I'd need to keep it safe, not counting maintenance on a luxury vehicle. I did the math lying awake at 3 a.m. and my stomach dropped, because I had just locked myself into financial prison for 6 years, all because I wanted to look like I had money instead of actually building wealth. And that's when it hit me. This wasn't just about the car. The car was symptom number 1 of a disease I didn't even know I had. I was sick with status buying. And this BMW was just the most expensive mistake in a long list of purchases that were destroying my financial future while making me look successful. Sound familiar? If you're sitting there right now feeling that uncomfortable twist in your gut, recognizing yourself in this story, good. Because what I'm about to share with you over the next 30 minutes might be the most important financial wake-up call you ever get. We're going to talk about 7 specific things that poor people buy to look rich, that rich people never touch. And I'm going to show you exactly how these purchases are keeping you broke, no matter how much money you make. Before the car, there were the bags. Oh God, the bags. I remember the first time I walked into a luxury boutique with the intention of actually buying something. My heart was racing like I was about to commit a crime. Because in a way I was. I was about to commit financial suicide, but I called it an investment in myself. That's what we do, right? We rebrand terrible decisions with empowering language until they sound like wisdom. It started innocently enough. I went to a networking event for financial professionals, and I noticed something. Every successful-looking woman there had a designer bag. Not just any bag, the bag. You know the one I'm talking about. the one with the logo that screams I made it without actually saying anything. And there I was with my Target tote, feeling like an imposter in my own industry. I spent that entire evening not networking, not learning, not connecting, just obsessing over handbags, comparing myself, feeling less than, deciding that the only thing standing between me and success was $2,500 worth of leather and metal hardware.
So I bought it. Put it on a credit card because I definitely didn't have $2,500 lying around. And you know what happened? For exactly 1 week, I felt incredible. I felt like I belonged. I carried that bag into meetings, into coffee shops, into the grocery store. I positioned it carefully in every photo. I noticed when people noticed it. And every single time someone's eyes lingered on that logo, I felt validated. Like I had finally purchased my ticket into the club of people who had their lives together.
But here's the thing about designer armor. It doesn't actually protect you from anything. That bag didn't make me a better financial advisor. It didn't bring me more clients. It didn't increase my income. It didn't pay my rent or reduce my debt. What it did do was start a cascade of purchases that I couldn't stop. Because once you have the bag, you need the shoes to go with it. And then you need the dress that matches the aesthetic. And then you need the coat because you can't wear a luxury bag with a cheap coat. And before you know it, you're spending hundreds of dollars every month maintaining an image that's bleeding you dry. I became a regular at that boutique. The sales associates knew my name. They'd text me when new collections arrived. They'd set aside pieces they thought I'd like. And I loved it. I loved being treated like someone important, like someone who mattered, like someone who had money. The irony is that the more I spent trying to look wealthy, the broker I actually became. I was wearing $1,000 dresses while eating ramen for dinner. I had $1,500 shoes and a negative bank balance. I looked successful in every photo, but behind those carefully curated images, I was drowning in debt and anxiety. Let me give you the actual numbers because they're horrifying. Over 3 years, I spent approximately $18,000 on designer clothes, bags, and accessories. $18,000. That's $6,000 a year, $500 a month. On things I wore maybe 10 times before they went out of style or I got bored of them. And here's the really messed up part. I justified every single purchase. This bag is a classic. It'll last forever. These shoes are an investment piece. This dress will pay for itself in confidence. I had a story for everything, a rationalization for every swipe of that credit card. But the truth I wasn't ready to face was this. I wasn't buying clothes. I wasn't buying accessories. I was buying permission to feel worthy. I was buying temporary relief from the constant anxiety that I wasn't enough. I was buying a costume that let me play the role of successful woman because I didn't know how to actually become her. And the fashion industry knows this. They market to our insecurities. They sell us the fantasy that if we just buy the right things, wear the right brands, carry the right bag, we'll finally be the person we're pretending to be. I had a problem with new, not just new things, new everything. The newest iPhone, the latest MacBook, the best headphones, the upgraded version of whatever I already owned that worked perfectly fine. I was a serial upgrader. And I didn't even realize it was a disease until I looked at my bank statements and saw a pattern that made me sick. Every September, like clockwork, there was a charge for a new iPhone. Every year or two, a new laptop. Every few months, some new gadget or upgraded piece of technology that I absolutely needed right now. Here's how the cycle worked. Apple would announce a new iPhone with a slightly better camera, a marginally faster processor, maybe a new color. And suddenly the phone in my hand that worked perfectly yesterday felt obsolete, outdated, embarrassing. I'd watch the keynote presentation and feel this visceral need to upgrade, not because my current phone was broken, but because it wasn't the newest one anymore. And that feeling, that anxiety of being left behind, of not having the latest thing, was so powerful that I'd pre-order before I even checked my bank account. The math on this is absolutely brutal when you actually add it up. Let's say you upgrade your phone every year at around $1,000. That's $1,000 annually. Over 10 years, that's $10,000 on phones. $10,000. And phones depreciate faster than almost anything else you can buy. The moment you walk out of the store, that $1,000 phone is worth maybe $600. 6 months later, it's worth $400. A year later, someone will give you $200 for it if you're lucky. You're essentially lighting money on fire every single year for the privilege of having a camera that's 5% better. But it wasn't just phones. I upgraded my laptop every 2 years like it was a mandatory requirement. Spent $2,500 on a new MacBook Pro because the old one was getting slow, completely ignoring the fact that I could have upgraded the RAM and storage for $200 and gotten 3 more years out of it. I bought noise-canceling headphones for $350, then upgraded to the newer model 18 months later for $400. I bought an iPad, then an iPad Pro, then a newer iPad Pro. I bought a smartwatch, then upgraded that too. And every single time I told myself the same lie. This is an investment in my productivity. Except it wasn't. Because here's the truth about tools versus toys. A tool makes you money. A toy costs you money. And I was buying toys while calling them tools. That new MacBook didn't make me write better financial advice. That new iPhone didn't bring me more clients. Those expensive headphones didn't increase my income. They were toys. Expensive, shiny toys that made me feel like a successful professional but did absolutely nothing for my actual success. Meanwhile, wealthy people I knew were using 3-year-old phones and 5-year-old laptops and focusing their money on things that actually generated wealth. The breaking point came when I was upgrading my phone for the 4th year in a row, and the guy at the store asked me what was wrong with my current one. And I said nothing. He looked confused, asked why I was upgrading then. And I didn't have an answer. I stood there, credit card in hand, about to spend $1,200, and I couldn't articulate a single reason why, except that it was new, and I wanted it. That's when I realized I wasn't buying technology. I was buying the feeling of being current, the illusion of being someone who could afford to always have the latest thing. I was upgrading my way into poverty. The apartment was $2,200 a month, $2,200. For a 1-bedroom in a trendy neighborhood that I picked specifically because I wanted people to be impressed when I gave them my address. Not because it was close to work, not because it was a good value, but because when I said the neighborhood name at parties, people would nod with that knowing look that said, "Oh, you're doing well." And that validation was worth more to me than financial security. Here's what the financial advice books tell you. Your rent should be 30% of your gross income, maximum. My gross income was $65,000 a year. That's about $5,400 a month. 30% of that is $1,620. I was paying $2,200. That's 41% of my gross income. Before taxes. After taxes, I was spending almost 60% of my take-home pay on rent. 60%. Before I bought groceries. Before I paid my car. Before I did anything else. I was hemorrhaging money just to have an address that sounded successful. But it wasn't just the rent. That's what they don't tell you about luxury apartments. The rent is just the entry fee. Then comes the parking, because street parking doesn't exist, and you can't leave your BMW outside. That was another $250 a month. Then the amenity fee for the gym and pool I used maybe twice, $75. Then the premium for the unit with the view, because what's the point of living there if you don't have the view? Then the utilities that somehow cost twice as much as my old place. And suddenly, my $2,200 apartment was actually costing me $2,700 a month. And then there were the invisible costs, the costs nobody warns you about. Living in a wealthy neighborhood means your neighbors have money, real money, and when you're faking it, you have to keep up. They're ordering from expensive restaurants, so you order too. They're going to the new wine bar, so you go. They're hiring cleaning services and getting their groceries delivered and treating themselves to spa days. And you're doing all of it on credit cards because you can't admit that you can't actually afford the lifestyle that comes with the address. I was living in financial quicksand, and every month I sank a little deeper. The worst part was knowing that wealthy people weren't doing this. The actual wealthy people I knew, the ones with real money, they lived below their means. They bought properties instead of renting impressions. They chose neighborhoods based on investment potential, not Instagram appeal. One of my wealthiest clients lived in a modest two-bedroom in an unfashionable neighborhood and drove a 10-year-old Honda. And you know what he was doing with the money he saved? Buying rental properties, building actual wealth. While I was burning 60% of my income on temporary housing that built zero equity and impressed nobody who actually mattered, I remember the day I got my lease renewal notice. They were raising the rent to $2,350, an extra $150 a month, $1,800 a year. And I had this moment of absolute clarity where I realized I had two choices. I could sign that lease and continue drowning, or I could admit that this apartment was eating my financial future alive. That the address didn't make me successful, that the view didn't pay my bills, that I was trading wealth for the illusion of wealth, and it was the worst trade I'd ever made. Brunch. Let's talk about brunch. Because nothing summarizes financial delusion quite like spending $300 on eggs and champagne. I became a brunch person. Not because I loved brunch, but because brunch was what successful people did on Sundays. They gathered at trendy restaurants with floor-to-ceiling windows, ordered overpriced mimosas, and posted photos that screamed, "Look at my beautiful life." And I wanted that life so badly I was willing to pay for it, literally one bottomless mimosa at a time. Here's how it escalated. It started innocently with $30 brunches once a month. Then it became every weekend because I didn't want to miss out. Then I started inviting people, picking up the tab to look generous, to look like someone who had money to spare. Before I knew it, I was spending $400 to $500 a month on brunch alone. That's $6,000 a year, on breakfast food and cheap champagne marked up 400%. And the insane part? I'd skip making coffee at home to save $3, then blow $80 on avocado toast and cocktails without thinking twice. But brunch was just the beginning. There were the dinners. The fancy dinners at restaurants I couldn't pronounce where the menu didn't have prices, because if you had to ask, you couldn't afford it. Spoiler alert, I couldn't afford it. But I went anyway. Because that's where deals happened, where connections were made, where successful people gathered. I'd order the moderately priced entree while everyone else got the expensive stuff. Then the bill would come and someone would suggest splitting it evenly. And suddenly I was paying $90 for a $40 meal because I couldn't be the person who asked to pay separately. And then there were the trips. Oh God, the trips. Weekend getaways to beach resorts I found on Instagram. Luxury hotels because I deserved to treat myself. All-inclusive packages that I put entirely on credit cards because I'd earned this experience. I'd scroll through travel influencers and feel this burning jealousy that they were living while I was just existing. So I'd book trips I couldn't afford to destinations I'd barely researched, just to have the photos, just to prove I was living my best life. One weekend in Miami cost me $2,300. $2,300 that I didn't have, charged to a credit card that was already dangerously close to maxed out. The worst part wasn't the money, though. The worst part was that I wasn't even enjoying it. I was so stressed about the cost that I couldn't be present. I'd be at dinner thinking about the bill. I'd be on vacation calculating how many months it would take to pay off. I'd be at brunch wondering if my card would decline. I was buying experiences I couldn't afford, then being too anxious to actually experience them. I was trading genuine joy for Instagram moments. Trading financial security for temporary validation from people who wouldn't help me when the bills came due. And here's what really kills me looking back. I was spending $4,000 to $5,000 a year on experiences that I barely remember. But if I had invested that money instead, if I had put $5,000 a year into an index fund for 10 years, I'd have over $70,000 today. $70,000. That's not including compound interest. That's just the raw deposits. I traded potential wealth for mimosas I don't remember drinking, and hotel rooms I can barely recall. I bought the illusion of living while actually preventing myself from ever truly living without financial stress. The call came on a Wednesday morning at 9:47 a.m. I know the exact time because I was staring at my phone, watching it ring, knowing it was a collections agency, and knowing I couldn't avoid it anymore. My credit cards were maxed, all 5 of them. $53,000 in credit card debt. $53,000. I answered the phone, and the woman on the other end was polite but firm. She asked when I could make a payment, and I started crying. Not delicate tears, ugly, desperate sobbing, because I couldn't make a payment. I had $37 in my checking account and my rent was due in 3 days. That moment, sitting on my bathroom floor with my phone pressed to my ear while a stranger asked me about money I didn't have, was my rock bottom. But here's what's messed up. Rock bottom wasn't when I bought the $38,000 car. It wasn't when I spent $2,500 on a handbag. It wasn't any single purchase. Rock bottom was the moment I realized that every single thing I owned that made me look successful was actually evidence of my failure. That BMW in the parking lot? It was a monument to my financial illusion. Those designer bags, expensive props in a play where I was pretending to be wealthy while actually drowning in debt. I hung up the phone and just sat there, looked around my expensive apartment with my expensive things and felt nothing but shame. Because I had done this to myself. Nobody forced me to buy that car. Nobody made me rent that apartment. Nobody held a gun to my head and demanded I upgrade my phone every year or buy designer clothes or spend thousands on experiences I couldn't afford. I did this. Every swipe of that credit card, every signature on those loan documents, every time I chose looking successful over actually building wealth, that was me. And I couldn't blame bad luck or the economy or my salary. I was a financial advisor earning $65,000 a year, and I was broke. Worse than broke. I was in debt up to my eyeballs. That's when the realization hit me like a freight train. There was a pattern. 7 specific categories of purchases that had destroyed my financial life. The luxury car that impressed nobody but cost me everything. The designer clothes and accessories that made me look wealthy while making me actually poor. The constant tech upgrades that drained thousands for marginally better features. The expensive apartment that ate 60% of my income. The luxury experiences and lifestyle inflation that left me with photos but no savings. And it wasn't just me. I started thinking about my friends, my clients, everyone I knew who looked successful but privately struggled. We were all making the same mistakes, buying the same 7 things, following the same path to looking rich while staying broke. And then I thought about the actually wealthy people I knew. The clients with real money, not the appearance of money. What were they buying? What were they not buying? And I realized with shocking clarity that rich people avoided these 7 categories like the plague. They didn't drive luxury cars, they bought reliable vehicles and invested the difference. They didn't rent expensive apartments, they bought properties that appreciated. They didn't upgrade technology for fun, they bought tools that generated income. They weren't buying status, they were building wealth. And the gap between looking rich and being rich wasn't luck or salary. It was decisions. It was what you chose to buy with the money you had. I created a challenge for myself that day on the bathroom floor. A 30-day purchase audit, and it changed absolutely everything. The rules were simple but brutal. For 30 days, I had to track every single purchase and ask myself one question before buying anything. Is this a status purchase or a wealth builder? That's it. One question. But that question forced me to confront the truth about every dollar I spent. And the truth was devastating. Here's how it worked. Before I bought anything at all, I had to pause and honestly answer whether I was buying it to look successful or to build actual wealth. Was I buying this coffee because I needed caffeine or because I wanted to be seen in this trendy coffee shop? Was I upgrading this perfectly good phone because it was broken or because I wanted people to notice I had the newest one? Was I renting this expensive apartment because it was the best value or because I wanted an impressive address? The answers were uncomfortable. About 80% of my purchases were status buys. I was spending 80% of my discretionary income on looking wealthy instead of becoming wealthy. The audit revealed patterns I couldn't unsee. Every Sunday I'd spend $300 on brunch and shopping. Every month I'd buy something designer because I felt like I deserved it. Every year I'd upgrade tech I didn't need. I'd overspend on rent by $600 monthly. I'd finance experiences on credit cards. And when I added it all up, when I calculated how much money was bleeding out of my life for status purchases, the number was $42,000 a year. $42,000 that could have paid off my debt, built savings, invested in assets. Instead, it evaporated into thin air, leaving me with nothing but the appearance of success and the reality of financial desperation. So, I made changes. Painful, uncomfortable, ego-destroying changes. I sold the BMW and bought a 7-year-old Honda Civic for $9,000 cash. People asked what happened to my car, and I told them the truth. I couldn't afford it. I moved out of my luxury apartment into a modest one-bedroom for $1,400 a month. Saved $800 instantly. I stopped upgrading my phone, kept using my 2-year-old model for 3 more years, sold most of my designer clothes and bags, recovered about $6,000, started meal prepping instead of brunching, canceled subscriptions I didn't use. Every change felt like admitting failure at first. But then something shifted. I started sleeping through the night. The constant anxiety that woke me at 3 a.m. wondering how I'd pay bills. That started fading. My credit card balances started going down instead of up. I opened an investment account and started putting money in every month. Not huge amounts, $200 at first, but it was $200 building wealth instead of $200 building an image. And slowly, month by month, I stopped feeling like a fraud. Because I wasn't trying to look like something I wasn't anymore. I was actually becoming financially stable. Today, 3 years later, I drive that same Honda Civic. It's paid off. I live in a modest apartment and invest the difference. My phone is 2 generations old. I own 3 handbags total, none of them designer. And you know what? I'm happier than I've ever been. Because I'm not faking it anymore. I'm actually building it. My net worth is positive for the first time in my adult life. I have 6 months of expenses saved. I'm investing 15% of my income. And the wealthy people I work with? They respect me more now than they ever did when I was trying to impress them. So here's my challenge to you. Start your own 30-day purchase audit today. Before you buy anything, ask yourself, is this a status purchase or a wealth builder? Track it. Be honest. And watch the patterns emerge. You're not broken, you're not bad with money, you're just buying the wrong things. And the moment you change what you buy, you change your entire financial future. The question is, are you ready to stop looking rich and start actually building wealth?